11 C-117 heavy transport aircraft were observed departing from Ramstein and Lakenheath on a single day, carrying critical cargo en routes to the eastern Mediterranean, Jordan, and Qatar. This unprecedented logistical surge signals a new and dangerous phase in the escalating tensions across the Persian Gulf, reminiscent of the rapid military buildup seen in the region during the early 2000s. The situation is now reaching levels never before witnessed, with the United States Navy finalizing preparations for a potential final blow operation, while Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps brazenly challenges American naval power, pushing readiness for a possible hot contact to an extraordinary scale. Senior Iranian officials, acting under what they describe as a historic order from the new supreme leader, have announced absolute dominance over the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's 2,000-kilometer coastline. The Revolutionary Guards are openly declaring the Hormuz Strait naval blockade is a declaration of war, and our warriors can move into action tomorrow. At the heart of this show of force lies a massive strategic gamble. The regime refuses to step back from its uranium program, enriched to 60%, while simultaneously attempting to maintain control of the strait, the jugular vein of global energy trade. This 60% enrichment figure is a stark departure from historical nuclear proliferation patterns, indicating a deliberate and rapid advancement far beyond civilian energy needs, placing the regime on the precipice of weaponization and dramatically shortening the timeline for any diplomatic resolution. However, when we examine the other side of this coin, the hollowness of these audacious claims becomes clear. Behind the curtain, a desperate regime in deep panic is sending envoys, one after another, through Pakistan to Washington, pleading, "Please stop the attacks." This strategic hypocrisy and brazen attitude are deemed unacceptable by the Trump administration, which has made no nuclear weapon its #1 priority, and is now exhausting its patience. Indeed, the final blow briefing presented by CENTCOM Commander Brad Cooper at the White House reveals just how devastating a plan the U.S. has prepared against these threats. These operational options, targeting remaining military assets, the leadership cadre, and vital infrastructure, are vindicating the fear within the regime. But when diplomatic deadlocks are exhausted, and the Revolutionary Guard Corps pulls the trigger for a naval blockade, what will truly unfold on the ground? It is at this point that we need to analyze, step by step, how Iran's asymmetric naval doctrine will face terrifying destruction. The military backbone of Iran's plan is built on an asymmetric swarm warfare doctrine. At the forefront of this doctrine are ultra-fast stealth missile boats like the Hydar 110, a great source of pride for the regime. These twin-hulled catamarans, manufactured from carbon fiber and weighing only 9 tons, are capable of reaching speeds of 110 knots, approximately 203 kilometers per hour. Iranian commanders calculate that these boats will penetrate the radar range of massive, cumbersome American warships, attacking in dense swarms and creating confusion. The regime believes these lightweight, carbon fiber-hulled boats, moving in swarms in shallow waters, will catch the massive U.S. warships off guard. But this plan on paper does not align with the ruthless mathematics and technological chasm of the modern battlefield. If Iran attempts to deploy these boats in swarms, the U.S. military will respond to this challenge not just with standard patrol ships, but with the sky's most relentless tank hunters. Washington is preparing 10 Thunderbolt II jets for a deadly hunt. When Iran attempts to attack with missile boats, the A-10s will be waiting for them with a firepower that will swat these assault craft like flies. Moreover, the American military has recently given the A-10 aircraft a very critical operational flexibility. These jets can now refuel in the air from C-130 Hercules tanker aircraft using the probe-drogue system, eliminating their dependence on traditional boom systems. This technical detail means the A-10s can patrol over Gulf waters for hours at very low altitude and low speed, transforming into stationary hunter platforms in the sky. Iran's confidence in its boat's speed will experience a dramatic collapse against the integrated air power that the American military deploys in all its magnificence. Not just the A-10s, another key element in this hunting party will be attack helicopters. Hellfire missiles fired from platforms like Apache and Cobra possess the capability to lock onto these boats, speeding across the water within seconds, thanks to their advanced thermal and laser seeker heads. Even if a Hydar 110 boat is one of the world's fastest attack craft, its maximum speed is 203 kilometers per hour. This figure may look impressive for a water surface, but when compared to the speed of a guided missile advancing beyond the speed of sound, or the kinetic energy of the A-10's 30mm GA-U-8 cannon, firing 70 rounds per second, it remains a laughable challenge. Before the missile boats can even enter range, they will be sunk within seconds before this staggering firepower, and the attack planned in swarms will transform into a field of wreckage. Iran's speed trap strategy actually means nothing more than sending its own naval forces on an open suicide mission in Gulf waters. After this probable catastrophe at sea, if the regime attempts retaliation with long-range missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, it will crash into an even more insurmountable wall. As of now, 3 aircraft carriers, a total of 27 warships, and over 200 fighter jets are on full alert around the Strait of Hormuz. Once the initial shock is absorbed, Iran may want to play its remaining cards, attempting ballistic missile and kamikaze drone attacks. But when we look at the military buildup picture on the ground, the picture awaiting Tehran is far darker. Iran's missiles and drones are largely defenseless against the massive electronic jamming wall created by American F-18 and F-35 fighters. These jets offer the capability to detect and shut down target radar and guidance frequencies the moment they become airborne through integrated electronic warfare systems. The American electronic umbrella over the strait is at a level that will paralyze all of the regime's communication and targeting networks. Moreover, the equation is being joined by the fact that B-1 strategic bombers, known for their payload capacities and cruising speeds, are on the way. But the U.S. is not content with just its existing forces. It is also preparing to deploy a massive element that will fundamentally shake all geopolitical balances on the field. CENTCOM is planning to deploy Dark Eagle hypersonic missiles to the Middle East for a possible deep strike against Iran. This development changes everything on the military chessboard. The introduction of Dark Eagle hypersonic missiles fundamentally alters the strategic calculus, as their speed and maneuverability render traditional deep strike doctrines obsolete, effectively eliminating Iran's ability to shield its critical assets through geographic depth or hardened bunkers, a capability previously thought secure. Until now, Iran had been pursuing a strategy of using its own geographic expanse as a shield. Beyond trusting its fast boats and drones, its real guarantee was taking its long-range ballistic missile launchers away from Gulf shores and hiding them deep in the country and in mountainous regions. The Tehran administration believed that by positioning these launchers beyond the range of the American military's conventional Tomahawk cruise missiles, it could comfortably target U.S. bases in the Gulf, Arab countries, and Israel from safe zones. But the dead ends of this strategy are obvious. The deployment of the Dark Eagle system to the field can solve Iran's threat equation in an instant. Traveling at over 5 times the speed of sound, Mach 5+, and capable of making complex maneuvers to evade air defense systems as it approaches its target, this technology demolishes the depth defense doctrine. This is exactly why Dark Eagle can arrive as a game-changer to the region. Iran's bunkers carved into mountains, or mobile launchers, will not escape being targeted against this enormous kinetic energy and speed. The regime can neither hide from these weapons nor stop them with its outdated air defense systems. The logistical infrastructure of this massive military preparation is also being woven without pause. In the air corridor between Europe and the Middle East, C-117A heavy transport aircraft are in constant flight. On a single day alone, 11 C-117 aircraft were observed departing from Ramstein and Lakenheath, carrying cargo on routes to the eastern Mediterranean, Jordan, and Qatar. Turkey's Incirlik Air Base has become one of the most critical springboards of this massive air bridge. C-117s, C-130s, and refueling aircraft complete their logistical preparations here before transitioning to strategic points like Djibouti and Diego Garcia. It appears Washington is not conducting a short-term show of force in the region. Rather, it is building the supply chain for a possible operation that could last months on solid foundations. The reality that Tehran must contend not just with regional allies, but with a global logistics highway is deepening the panic within the administration even further. As the military and technological encirclement ring tightens, the strategic dimension of the matter is moving to a phase that shakes the Tehran regime's internal structure and political legitimacy. The briefing CENTCOM commander Brad Cooper presented to President Trump at the White House proves that the American military's options on the table are not limited to deterrence alone. The final blow operation plan, placed on the table, in every aspect beyond its name, offers the infrastructure for a regime change. On the target list, 60% of Iran's still functional naval forces, half of its ballistic missile launchers, 2/3 of its air force, and critical military facilities hidden underground. The erasure of military capability at this scale means not just the defeat of an army, but the shattering of the armor that protects the regime against internal opposition structures. The regime's uncompromising public posture is being increasingly wounded by the dissolution on the domestic front. The mysterious explosions and gas leak reports, occurring one after another in major cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz, the country's lifelines, are signaling that the system is beginning to collapse from within, rather than mounting military resistance. Regardless of which scenario is valid, the result is the same. The state's promise to provide its own security has largely gone bankrupt. Those who message the outside world that the key to Hormuz is in our hands have fallen into a position where they cannot establish security on their own streets. The stance of regional allies is the most ruthless proof of the geopolitical isolation Iran has fallen into. The recent decisions by the United Arab Emirates contain a level of confrontation rarely seen in diplomatic relations. The UAE is not only allowing intensive positioning of American cargo aircraft on its territory, but is also issuing a very clear order to its own citizens to immediately leave Iran, Lebanon, and Iraq. The situation does not stop there. Within Emirates' borders, existing Islamic Republic flags are being removed from shops and civilian areas, replaced with the old Iranian flags bearing the lion and sun symbol, considered the regime's historical enemy. This symbolic rejection by a neighboring state, replacing the current national flag with a historical opposition emblem, is an exceptionally provocative diplomatic act, signaling a profound shift in regional alliances and a direct challenge to the regime's legitimacy that goes far beyond typical diplomatic condemnation. Being subjected to such a symbolic and direct rejection of legitimacy by its own border neighbor may enrage Tehran's leadership, but there is nothing they can do beyond diplomatic condemnations. The threats regime officials hurl about destroying all palaces in the Gulf in the event of an attack on their leaders are turning into a hollow echo against the UAE's calm and calculated moves. If Iran stubbornly persists with its naval blockade strategy and launches action against this military buildup, the resulting economic cost will bring about the regime's end. Oil revenues, already hanging by a thread, will come to a standstill. Import chains will snap, and the continuity of daily life will be severely disrupted. As General Jack Keane rightfully emphasizes, persuading a regime that remains indifferent to its own people's suffering and economic devastation through diplomatic means is virtually an illusion. But remaining indifferent to their people's suffering does not mean they can be protected from that people's rage. When guards whose salaries are delayed, proxy forces like Hezbollah and Houthis whose funds are cut, and growing internal unrest come together, the so-called flawless military doctrine, engineered by the Revolutionary Guards, transforms into a ticking time bomb, catching fire inside its own home. Iran's challenge in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, mounting a stand with fast boats against A-10 Thunderbolt jets, Hellfire missiles, and the hypersonic horizon, is a candidate for one of military history's most lethal strategic errors. Asymmetric doctrines based on speed and swarm logic will be extinguished within seconds against 30mm rounds gliding from the sky and technological superiority that never misses its target. While the regime tells a tale of audacious heroism before the public, its diplomatic pleas behind the curtain are an open confession of the absolute collapse they see approaching. With its depth defense to be pierced by Dark Eagle missiles and all its shields to be lowered by electronic warfare systems, the Tehran administration has thrown not just its military assets, but its political existence in its own geography into a massive gamble. And the nature of war is merciless. The account settled by this technological asymmetry will permanently rewrite not just maps, but regional history. However, the U.S. final blow plan is not limited to this firepower coming from the air and sea. The main strategic move, which will be implemented immediately following the military destruction and will completely sever the regime's lifeline, is a naval blockade unprecedented in history. Now, let's look at the big picture. This blockade isn't an isolated move. It's the removal of Iran's last card. Since the war began, Iran's leverage has been stripped away one by one. Air defense collapsed in the first weeks. Over 100 coalition aircraft entered Iranian airspace, struck central Tehran, and returned. Untouchable underground depots were penetrated by B-2s, carrying 14-ton bunker busters. Naval power was destroyed. Bushehr Naval Base leveled. Command chain was broken. Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters demolished. Intelligence chief and operations commander killed. Proxy network weakened. Miabad logistics hub struck, Supply chains to Hezbollah and Houthis disrupted. And Iran's last card was Hormuz. We'll close the strait, hold the world economy hostage. For decades, Tehran's most powerful deterrent. When the war started, they actually closed it. And it actually sent oil prices surging, dragged Europe into a fuel crisis, sparked trucker uprisings from Ireland to France. But now the US is forcing that strait open, clearing the mines, creating a safe corridor, offering it to world trade, and simultaneously locking Iran's own ports. Oil can't leave, materials can't enter. Revenue drops to zero. Iran wanted to punish the world by closing the strait. America's answer: fine, we're opening the strait, but we will be the ones locking you. Iran's own weapon turned against it. The strait is open for everyone except Iran. The Allied front is mixed, and this wasn't a surprise for the US. Trump said other countries will join, but currently only the UAE and Bahrain have announced support. The UK, Germany, and Australia refused assistance. France is distant. The US is running this operation largely alone, raising questions about the blockade's sustainability. 2 carrier strike groups, dozens of destroyers, reconnaissance aircraft, submarines, all requiring fuel, ammunition, personnel rotation, and maintenance. How long can a single country's navy sustain an operation of this scale? Weeks are possible, months are difficult, years nearly impossible. The real question is whether the blockade will exhaust the US before it forces Iran to the table. For developing nations, the blockade means rising energy bills. India, South Korea, Japan, every country buying Iranian oil must find alternative sources. India's situation is especially critical. The world's 3rd largest oil importer was buying cheap Iranian crude, now forced to pay market prices elsewhere. If the blockade extends, the risk of global recession is serious.